Okay, let's talk about measurement. Okay, so metrics are at the core of what it means to be agile. When we talked about amplifying learning, you have to have metrics from which to learn and from which to verify that any changes you've made have actually resonated, have made a difference. We've talked also about failing fast. Don't worry, it gets better. So we talked about failing fast. How do you know you failed? And to know that quickly. That's metrics. It's okay to fail so long as you do it fast. And that's the key thing. Don't be afraid to experiment, to try new things. Just make sure you know when you've gone down the wrong path. So there are some core agile metrics that everyone kind of knows about. We've talked about lead and cycle time. We talked about throughput. There's this one called cumulative flow, which basically takes tasks and categorizes them in some way, however you want, and puts them on a graph based on the number of tasks and time. And essentially, so I don't know if you can read this, but basically the purple is what's left to do, the red is what we're in process of doing, and the white or the beige is done. You want to be able to see how wide or how narrow these little zones are. You can also, by drawing some lines across the graph, figure out your average throughput, your average lead or cycle time, those kinds of things in cumulative flow. And you can, and these are very basic categories, you know, to do, doing, done. It could be whatever you want, the kinds of features, etc. However you choose to categorize. Of course, you have to deal with bugs. How many do you have? What type of bugs are they? How severe are they? Are these bugs occurring, if we're talking Scrum, are these bugs occurring mid-sprint? Or are they occurring in such a way where you have features that passed all these tests before, and then later on, 3 months down the road, all of a sudden, they're not working anymore? How do you handle those two different situations? Things like that. In Scrum in particular, you have specific metrics. We've talked about story points. You guys remember story points? And what are they?
Those things that you're going to get done.
Pardon me?
Those things that you're going to get done, or you want to get done.
Right. But it's more of a measurement, right? And it's, sorry, I'm hearing whispers. Go ahead, I'm sure you're right. Pardon me?
Size of the user.
Yes, size as defined by what? Yeah, exactly. It's, yeah. Right.
Ability to manage the priority backlog items.
Right, so it's kind of a fudge number, right? We've talked about this. It's not, there's nothing precise about it. It's meant to reflect the relative difficulty of something, considering the effort it'll take, the risk it entails, the value it offers, and it's team by team. What one team considers easy, another team might consider hard because of their experience. And related to these are burn down and velocity. Burn down meaning how much you have left and you want to track how much you have left versus how much you've accomplished. And velocity, which is Scrum's version of throughput, which is story points per sprint. The flaws with this, and you mentioned this, was first of all that it's relative, meaning that every team has its own kind of version of it. So you can't necessarily compare across teams. There's an administrative burden in the sense that someone has to go and actually go and edit some tracking system or something to let it know where you are in hours and all that, so we can then produce these numbers. But let me tell you, as a developer, there's nothing we hate more than like having to leave our code, switch over to this other app, and edit some bookkeeping numbers. We don't like that. It is a burden. And finally, there's this movement out there among the hipsters, no estimates, which is basically this idea that people are really bad at estimating, and why even bother trying? It's a waste of time because you're always so bad at it. So use that time to just build software. Now, I have disagreements with that movement, but the point is that if you agree with this, these metrics go away because they're all estimate-based. So there are some flaws there, though they're useful. Sources for metrics now. Let's talk about, well, maybe a little bit more mature and modern way of looking at agile metrics. There are 4 categories I've identified here. Your project tracking system has metrics in it. Your source control system has metrics in it. Your build pipeline, we'll talk a lot about that later. And the system monitoring, as it's deployed in production, how do you know what's going on? So let's get into some more detail here. In your project tracking system, you can get some pretty clear metrics that you can probably infer already. What are the estimates people have come up with? How has everything been tagged? You can add hashtags to all your features if you want to be able to search for them or categorize them a certain way. And it's very popular to do. Your bugs, of course. Recidivism, which is basically this idea that when you've moved something along the flow, you don't want it to have to come back for whatever reason. A common example would be, I got something done, and the testers figured out it didn't work, it comes back. No one likes that. But you want to know that it happened. And then who's been assigned what work. Now in Scrum in particular, you're told that the Scrum Master does not actually assign things. People go up and volunteer for the work they want to do. It's part of the self-organizing aspect. In Kanban, there is no such rule. So however the work is assigned, you want to know who's working on it. Some sample project tracking systems, a lot of these you probably know. Anyone have any experience with these, or any of these? Trello, I heard. Some Jira, anyone? I know a lot of people like Jira in government. Yeah, so you've seen all these. I just chose Fogbug, so I figured no one had heard of it. So just to show you some examples of what you can see. So in this case, you can actually go and drill down by the kinds of cases, the duration, the time range you're looking at, how you're sorting them, which project, what kind of release or milestone you care about, what's the elapsed time working on the thing, how much time's left, stuff like that. You can also drill down by individual and look at, on a in this case, per sprint basis, how people are doing individually. And then here's a burn down chart for the team. Things like that. You can look at all those sorts of metrics. Yes, sir.
It might vary from one to one, but how often do you look at this analysis? Is it beneficial after every sprint to go back and look, or I mean, is it to a degree in real time you're constantly looking? Yeah.
So I feel it's kind of like your stock portfolio. You don't want to look at it every day because you'll drive yourself nuts. Certainly, at least at the end of the sprint, if we're talking Scrum. If you're not doing Scrum, then at some relatively short period, but not too short. What does that mean? It depends on how you're doing it in Kanban. But if we're talking Scrum, just to keep it easy for the moment. At the end of the sprint, you'll probably talk about some of this at your demo, or at your review, sorry. And then if there are problems, you'll probably air them out at the retrospective. So at the very least, that often. If you are interested and you just want to see how things are tracking, particularly at the task level, oh, there's this one task that's really important to me, I just want to see how it's progressing, go ahead and look at it however you want. There's no real hard and fast rule, but I would say at the very least at the retrospective.
Okay, and so when we build this into the contract, we might leave it up to the vendor which tools they're going to use based on their approach, and they're kind of responsible for self-reporting it with some government oversight, or would you put this more on the government side that we want to track their productivity and efficiency? Right. So for one thing, you have to have them discuss whether the tool is open source or not, and if it's not, how do you handle the costs and any licensing or whatever, right? Once you're past that, I feel you should probably ask the vendor to indicate how they're going to provide the information for oversight purposes. Are they going to report to you? Are you going to be asking for them to provide information that needs to be available whenever I want to see it? I feel like in this case you have a lot of control here to sort of dictate if you want, or to let them tell you how they choose to report, and then look at the different choices and use that as a measurement factor. So I don't think there's a hard and fast rule, but it just depends on what you're comfortable with and making sure the vendor is cool with that and willing to express that. That's a great question. Yes?
Do you have multiple development teams?
Yes, ma'am.
Is it best practice to let them use different tools, or should you have a tool across your agency that you have the developers use, even if they're different contractors? so that learning curves, I mean, I'm thinking of all the logistics on ETOs, things like that, but also, is there ever the comparability across teams? I know they're different and they're relative, but is there any value in having similar tools for reporting?
Oh, could you repeat the question?
No,
Just do you want me to repeat the question?
Yeah.
Oh, so basically the question is about, sorry, is about the applicability of one tool across many teams, or do you want to have them decide which tool they want to use and give them that autonomy? Correct? So I would say that it's easier for me if I'm running something to have the tool that I like and see if the vendors are willing to use it. If they want to offer an alternative, okay, but offer me a compelling reason why. I personally don't want to have to manage a bunch of different tools and have to like learn how they all work. To me, that's a agency by agency question, and like I don't know what's better. It's just that for me, managing one thing is a lot easier than managing a bunch of things. And if a vendor is going to suggest their own specific tool, they better have a good reason, and it better not be because it's their like COTS product. I'm serious, right? I mean, they're going to probably try to do that kind of those shenanigans. So yeah, I would say one. If I were like a CIO of an agency, I would want one, but if they want to offer an alternative, let's hear why.
And who does the presentation when?
Which presentation?
Like if you're using one of these tools
Mhm.
and you're through your first sprint or whatever, and you're
Okay.
trying to look at the data, who is the product owner that would present that then?
There's no guidance on this. As I mentioned, I would say the product owner should do the demo. Therefore, you don't want to. Well, I would say you don't want to put too much pressure on the product owner to do everything. But if they want to, then they can, okay? But I would personally go with the Scrum Master. Personally. Again, you're going to have varied opinions. I would also have the individual developers, and some of them could be shy, and we're not always so great with people. But at least have them, chat a little bit, just so the stakeholders can see who's doing the work, and so at least maybe talk about their part of the work and that sort of thing. But I would say the product owner should handle the demo, the Scrum Master should handle a lot of the charts and other explanations of things. And then when you talk about individual features that were developed over the last couple of weeks, have the individual developers and testers and whatever to sort of chime in. But that's just me. Other questions? Okay. Source control. You guys know what that is? You ever work on a Word document with a team and everyone goes and they have the parent doc, someone creates the first version of it, and then everyone goes gets a copy on email, everyone hits track changes, the original person gets back all 20 submissions with everyone's changes. They have to decide which to incorporate and which not to. On a development team, you have the exact same kind of situation. You have a bunch of developers working on a single code base, and you want to know who's working on what, when are they making their changes, how do we actually resolve any conflicts. It's a lot nicer than Word's track changes and emailing it around. But you still have to manage exactly how everything's going to get merged into the final main line. Now, there are also, I mentioned this briefly, with distributed version control systems, you basically have the main line, make a copy on your machine, and then make your edits. And then when you're ready, you do what's called submitting a pull request, which is basically asking the people who manage the main line to review the code and decide if it's worthy of now merging it in. So another metric besides the who, what, when, and where of code changes is how many pull requests you have, were they accepted, were they denied, and what were the outcomes of the reviews of these pull requests. Now, here are some sample version control systems. You've probably heard of at least a couple of these. I'm going to take a look here at Git, or specifically GitHub. Now, GitHub and Git are not the same thing, but for now, let's consider the differences to be negligible. So now, here is the college scorecard on GitHub. And you can see here some data about how many pull requests there are, how many have been successful, how many were denied, how many were merged. What are your issues? You have 10 closed, 8 open. You have one author who's working really hard. Let's see. And you have the categories of various changes where they, or issues, I mean, excuse me. Were they closed? Were the pull requests just proposed or merged? Those kinds of things. Let's go to some fun pictures. So here are the contributors. So here's like a little individual card that shows what every individual is doing over time. And here is the team's progress. I can also pick a specific period of time and then look at everyone's contribution during that period. Commits, meaning I have now made my changes and pushed them in. So I can look at, let's take August 30th, seems pretty busy. And I can see here, by day of that week, how people were active. People were working on Sunday, some Saturday, lots of Saturday work, actually. But Tuesday, that's the big day. So you can actually see across time, both at the day level and at the month level, or at the week level. So, what else? Code frequency. This is basically how much code we're adding and removing. We've talked earlier about how we want to get rid of excess code because it's wasteful, like excess inventory is to a store. Getting rid of code is fine. Sometimes it's preferable. Punch cards. This gives you a distribution over not just days of the week, but times of the day. The network. Now, if this top line here, this black one, is the main line, the gospel truth about the code, here are people making their copy. I mentioned distributed and all that stuff. People are making their copies. Where are they? Are they making changes, or have they pushed those changes back over time? That sort of thing. And then finally, I can look at individual members of the team, maybe click on one person, see what they're doing. So the cool thing about this is that there is no administrative burden. Everyone as a developer is interacting with version control all the time. You just need a good system that knows how to crunch those numbers. You don't have to do anything special to make that happen. Now, there's an important lesson here. It's very easy to look at those individuals and say, well, why is Bobby, Bobby's kind of, bless you, Bobby's kind of sitting around and not doing much of anything. What's up with that? I mean, it's great that he overestimated and got his work done faster than you expected, but that doesn't mean you should be just sitting around. What am I paying him for? And that's not really the right way to look at it, because a command and control manager will come in and say, I want 100% utilization of everyone. So Bobby, go grab the next item on the backlog and start working on it. Make yourself useful. The problem is, when you do that, you've now increased work in process, which we talked about was bad. You've now increased your cycle time because there's probably a tester or two somewhere who are who are plenty busy. And now when Bobby goes and starts working on this thing, he's now added to their queue. We talked earlier about seeing the whole. You've now optimized your engineers, which is great, I guess. You have 100% utilization, but you've made your flow slower because you've now added more work in process, bigger chunks into the flow. That's not good. So now I'm going to show you, with your help, an instructional video on getting the most out of, or identifying how your workers are working, and then getting the most out of them. You got this? Yeah, the Avengers. There's probably going to be another ad. Oh, great. Okay, here we go. Right, rewind it. You missed the key line. But I do like how Captain America's like. All right. Hold on, let's start over. Let's resynchronize. Synchronize swatches. Anyone ever watch Parker Lewis back in the day? All right, so you got it? Gonna have to crank up the volume. It's a little quiet. I remember when I saw this. All right, sorry. All right. On 3, 1, 2, 3. Can you? Okay, so basically they're on the Shield Tri-Carrier, and you know, Captain America's sitting there ready for orders because that's how he is. But Iron Man's like, or Tony Stark is like, okay, he's kind of looking around. He's like, that man's playing Galaga. I saw it, and so he's identified someone who's kind of messing around, and so it's one of the funnier scenes of the movie. And the idea is, trust me. And so the idea is, though, you don't care about, or you shouldn't care about, individual workers at that level. What you should care about is work not getting done. If people want to surf Facebook, have at it. The problem is, you need to make sure work's getting done. I don't care about what individuals are doing. I care about the work that's there in process and that it moves through the flow. That's what matters. So focus on idle work and not idle workers.